Nderuar teleshikues, mirëmbrëma. Pothuajse në të gjitha rastet kur është folur për komunitetin shqiptar në Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës, pothuajse në të gjitha kontaktet që shtypi shqiptar ka pasur me përfaqësuesit e diasporës atje, gjithmonë është përmendur një emër i cili sipas të gjithë përfaqësuesve tanë atje ka qenë involvuar në politikën amerikane, ka qenë një nga emrat i cili më shumë se sa kushdo të shqiptar tjetër ka qenë pranë administratës së rëndësishme, pranë stafeve më të rëndësishme politike të Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës. Bëj fjalë për Bardhyl Tiranën. Në 1976, kur Presidenti Carter u zgjodh, kur Jimmy Carter u zgjodh presidenti i Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës, emri i tij gjendej në ceremoninë inauguruese ndër emrat kryesor, natyrisht në Shqipërinë komuniste të kohës, prania e një emri shqiptar, e një mbiemri Tirana në listën politike, stafeve politike të Presidentit Carter, natyrisht që ngjalli mjaft reagime. Bëhet fjalë për nivelet e larta të politikës komuniste shqiptare, e cila ishte në dieni të zhvillimeve amerikane ose arrinte të merrte përmes agjencive të lajmeve njoftime të atjeshme. Por kush ishte Bardhyl Tirana? Si kishte arritur të vendosë jo vetëm në Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës, por dhe të involvohej të bëjë pjesë e stafeve të rëndësishme politike të kohës. Me një karrierë 40 vjeçare profesionale, por dhe politike, të nisur në fillim të viteve 60 me presidentin atëhershëm Kennedy, por dhe më pas me një sër president të Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës demokrat, Bardhyl Tirana ndodhet në Tiranë për një vizitë pune, tashmë, sikur se thash, pas rreth 40 ca vjetësh karrierë e tij. Megjithatë, për të folur më tepër rreth lidhjeve të tij me Shqipërinë, familjes tij, angazhimeve politike dhe projektit për cilin ndodhet në Tiranë, është i ftuar sot në studion e televizionit Klan. Mr. Tirana, welcome in our studio.
Thank you very much.
You have an Albanian name and surname. What is the history of your family?
My father's family were Shkodran. My father's father, Sadiq, was the equivalent of the Minister of Post and Telegraph during the Ottoman Empire. And then later, when Albania was created independently, he helped found the PTT at the time. My father was born in 1907 during the Ottoman Empire.
Here in Albania?
In Shkodra. But his mother died when she was having her second childbirth. And he was brought up by his grandmother. At age 14, he left Albania and went to an American school and college in Istanbul.
Robert College.
Robert College.
He's very known here.
And after Robert College, he was sent to the London School of Economics. My mother, an American, went from Swarthmore College to the London School of Economics also. They met and fell in love and married in Paris in 1933. They came here for their honeymoon and went to Shkodra.
It was during the time of the king?
Yes. And then they went to Geneva, Switzerland, where my father worked for the Secretariat of the League of Nations, which was the predecessor of the United Nations.
The honeymoon, it was the last presence of your father in Albania?
Yes. And the war started, Mussolini conquered Albania, and Albania was and Europe was not very safe for Albanians who didn't want to work for the fascist government. So we left Switzerland and came to the United States. My father worked for the Department of Defense at the time, the War Department, during World War II.
Yes.
And for the State Department. And then after the war, he worked on the reconstruction of Europe, the Marshall Plan. And he continued to work in the State Department and something called the Export-Import Bank, which managed the reconstruction of Europe.
He was a political staff or administrative?
No, he was a career economist, but very high level, so that at the time of his death, he was administering the United States loan to Spain in exchange for strategic air command bases.
Press here has written that your father was died during a negotiation in Spain.
Yes.
For the American government. It is true?
Yes. Yes. He died on behalf, while working in Spain on behalf of the United States, and it was sudden. He was only 44, and no one expected it. It was a blood clot, a freak thing, unusual. And my mother was then 42, and I was 14.
You were born in the United States?
I was born in Geneva.
In Geneva.
And in 1937, and then came to the United States in 1939 when we left because of World War II and the fascists in Italy and Germany.
And what about you? How you were involved in the political life of United States?
Well, having grown up in Washington, I was always interested in politics. After graduating from law school, I came back down to Washington and went to work at the Department of Justice as a lawyer under Bobby Kennedy. I had known him beforehand.
In the time of President Kennedy.
At the time of President Kennedy. And I worked for Bobby from 1962 to 1964 when he resigned as Attorney General to run for Senate from the state of New York. And I quit my job, my then wife quit her job, and we went up to New York and campaigned with him.
You have been the personal staff of Bob Kennedy at the time?
During the campaign, yes. And afterwards, my then wife went on to Bobby's staff in the Senate, and I went into the private practice of law.
And what are your impressions by the Bob Kennedy?
Well, he changed dramatically. He was a tough, hard-driving person as Attorney General, but after the assassination of Jack Kennedy, he got very mellow, reflective, and very responsive. He was a great leader, and we had an enormous loss with his assassination. I was working on his presidential campaign in 1968, yes, as was my then wife, when he was assassinated.
You have been present?
I wasn't present at the time. I was working in the campaign offices in Washington.
Do you have a still relation with the Kennedy family?
Yes. I had known Jack Kennedy socially and had been at the White House and on his boat as a young man with him, but not well. Bobby Kennedy I did know well, and during the campaign in New York, I was basically the chauffeur for Ethel, his wife, and for the children. I knew the children well, and after the assassination, I continued to see Ethel and the children regularly over the years, and still do. And Bobby Kennedy's secretary, Angie Novello, worked for me in the Pentagon during the Carter years.
Yes. Mr. Tirana, here in Albania has been commented the fact during the presidency of Mr. Carter, you have been the political staff of him. What was your engagement in the Carter administration?
Well, it sort of grew. I was an expert in campaign transportation, in the problem of how you move the president, or the presidential candidate, the Secret Service who protect the president, the television and radio and newspaper personnel, and it's complicated because there's so many people moving and the need for security is so great.
To do, yes.
And I had done that for Bobby Kennedy in the senatorial campaign in New York, in the presidential campaign for Senator McGovern, in the presidential campaigns after Bobby's assassination in '68, for McGovern in '72, and Carter needed an expert, and he recruited me long before anybody knew he was running. And so I began working for him while he was still governor of Georgia in 1974. Then he had a need for an office in Washington because his campaign office was in Atlanta.
Yes.
And my law office became his Washington campaign office, and then he needed somebody to run the Washington campaign or to help manage it, and I was that. And he needed help with the Federal Election Commission, and I was that. And then when it came time when he won, and he had to appoint someone to run his inauguration, I was appointed to run his inauguration. And then I was sent to the Pentagon to become a member of the administration in the Pentagon.
Mr. Tirana, you're still a Democrat in the American political life?
Yes, I'm a Democrat in American political life, but I've worked with Republicans and Democrats. I've been elected to public office in Washington, not as a Democrat.
You have the relation with the other important politicians in the United States?
Today?
Yes.
I don't think so really today. I have access and I know some. I've been in the White House with President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton, but I don't know them. I do still have substantial contacts from my experience in the military, with the military. And yes, I know quite a few senators, but not the way I used to.
Mr. Tirana, during the communist regime, the communist period here, the family of your father was in Albania. Have you been in contact with them at that time?
No. My father warned my mother that he couldn't write because if he wrote or communicated, his family would be punished.
Yes.
He was a leading, well-known American citizen, and it was dangerous. And he died in 1952, and I kept asking my mother, well, shouldn't we write? Shouldn't we do something? And she said, no, it would be dangerous. And when I was first married in 1968 and working for Bobby Kennedy, I sent 1962, beg your pardon, and going to work for Bobby Kennedy, I sent a letter saying that I'd gotten married, and I sent a campaign flyer, and I got a letter back in French 6 months later saying that we hope that your government will soon permit you to visit us here. And it was a letter that I don't think was genuine, but I was told later on that there was trouble because I'd sent the letter. So we did not have any communications until my daughters went over in 1990. They were among the first of the Americans to go.
Yes.
I have two daughters, Kira and Amina, and they thought it'd be interesting to go. And they went to the UN mission in New York.
Albanian, yes.
Albanian mission, it was a communist government, and they asked for visas. And lo and behold, they got visas. They got on an airplane and came to Tirana.
For the first time after 50 years.
Yes, and somehow word had gotten out, and they were met by the family that we have here, even though they had not expected to meet anyone.
But during this period, when you was engaged in the American administration and in Albania it was a communist regime, have you been the other links with Albania, except your surname?
No other link, except that I was asked periodically to do Voice of America commentary or broadcasts.
And what was your image about the life and the situation in Albania here?
I thought it was probably very hard. Nice. And I was sad for the fact that Albania was imprisoned by this crazy dictator.
And when it was your first visit here?
First visit was in 1995. I came on part of a negotiation between the White House at the time. I told you before that I didn't have connections. I guess I really do. I had some connections in the White House and was working to release the $25 million Albanian American Enterprise Fund, and I was working with Skender Gelaga and President Berisha at the time, and a trip was scheduled to discuss, among other things, the Ammonia 5.
Yes. And I want to ask you, the first contact between the image and the reality here in Albania, how was?
Well, I was delighted with the people and the country. It's a beautiful country. Tirana, when I first saw it, was gray and bleak. You had the concrete block apartments, and that was sad. And of course, there wasn't a lot of activity yet because there hadn't been the opportunity for economic growth. It was all too new. So there was a lot of hope and promise, but a lot of work to be done.
But after 8 years, it's your second time in Albania, you found
well,
differences or?
Coming into Tirana this time, as I did on Monday, was enormously exciting because you see this tremendous amount of activity. The construction, people busy, moving all over, the cars, and the bright colors of the buildings instead of the gray drab, streets being reconstructed and paved, lighting being put up, trees planted, and the river, the banks of the river green, activity, progress. And I knew this was happening. I knew it was happening because the reputation had been announced in the United States. Recently, there was a long article in the New York Times.
Yes. By Mr. Simpson.
Yeah, with a photograph, and I'd heard about it. And so it's very exciting to be here now because good things are happening, whereas before all we heard about was bad news.
But do you feel a little bit Albanian, Mr. Tirana? I know that you're American, but...
Oh, yeah, it helps to feel Albanian. It's nice to be associated with success, and I see success happening.
And what is the purpose, the subject of your second visit here?
Well, I was asked to come by the United Nations Foundation.
Yes.
The United Nations Foundation was organized by Ted Turner, who founded CNN. Yes. And he gave the foundation $1 billion to support the work of the yes. United Nations.
I know the story very well.
And the president is Tim Wirth, a former United States Senator. And I know Senator Wirth quite well, and he knows my Albanian connections because my last name is Tirana. And
he has been in Tirana, Mr. Wirth, two times in 95 and 96.
Yes. At the time, he was Under Secretary of State
yes.
for Global Affairs.
I remember very well his visit here.
And he met Mayor Rama on a boat trip. And on the boat trip was the head of the United Nations Development Program. And they decided that Mayor Rama and the rehabilitation of Tirana was worth helping, even though it was not in the mainstream of what the United Nations Foundation does. So Mr. Wirth said, we want to get a project started. We don't have the time, it's out of the mainstream. The UN Foundation can't do it by itself, but we'll do a little bit. Will you organize it, go to Tirana and see what's involved and see if you can get help from the United States government and see if you can get help from other foundations and from the American Albanian diaspora in the United States. And Tim Wirth is very persuasive. I said I would do it, and I've come here for that purpose.
Do you have the links here in Albania? Have you seen the important people here during your visit?
Well, yes, indeed. I've seen Prime Minister Nano, and I thank him for his time. I've seen the Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Mehta, and thank him for his time. And I've seen former President Berisha, and thank him for his time. And we spoke about the project with all three, and I can say without any hesitation that all three think it is a very good idea. Anything that helps the rehabilitation of Tirana and improves the reputation of Albania is a good thing. So it has full support, I believe, from those three. In addition, the United Nations Development Program here and its director, Anna, have been very, very valuable. They have already worked on the Lana River project, the Clean and Green. The United Nations Development Program here, the UNDP office, would actually receive and disperse the money. The Tirana municipality will not handle the money. The management and administration will be done by UNDP Tirana.
And the last question, you spoke about the rehabilitation of Tirana, the new image of Tirana. What is your impression by Mr. Rama, the mayor of Tirana?
Tremendous
I have seen your
energy.
presence in a press conference with him.
I adore being with him. It makes me want to get back into politics. Having run for public office and been elected and served, it was on a local level in the city of Washington. And I've been around mayors before, and I just wish him the best. And I think he's a great promise for the future of Albania and the future of his generation of Albanians.
And the last question, it is the second time. We'll have a third time in Albania?
Oh, yes. I'm certain to be back. And I told my wife, who wanted to come with me, that this was going to be a frantic trip. I wouldn't have any time. And she said, well, you can go alone. I understand, sort of, but I want you to take me soon. Not rushed and for an extended period.
Mr. Tirana, thank you very much.
Thank you
for being here in this studio. And I think the third time we will have the possibility to discuss about the new changement of Tirana and Albania in general.
Thank you.
Nderuar teleshikues, keni ndjekur këtë intervistë me zotin Bardhyl Tirana, një nga personalitetet e njohur diasporës shqiptare në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës, i cili ndodhet për një vizitë në Tiranë. Natë e mirë dhe miropafshim. Thank you.
Thank you.